Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you how to use some 15-0s and some Delicas to make your own beaded toggle. It's really going to make the rest of your seed beaded bracelet or a bracelet really pop. You can even just do it on a necklace. It looks so much more finished and more decorative than just your average clasp when you're putting a lot of time and effort into a seed bead bracelet. It looks nice to finish it off with the clasp. This clasp is based on peyote stitch, so if you're not familiar with peyote, you may want to hit pause on this one, check out some of our other YouTube videos, get a little bit more familiar with peyote, and then come on back to me here with this video and make some toggles. For the toggles, we're going to be using 15-0 seed beads. The color I'm using is dyed opaque bright purple. And I'm using 11-0 Delica beads, and this is matte opaque cobalt. And I chose these colors because they're very similar, and that way you won't see a lot of difference when I have the smaller beads on the interior of my toggle, as well as I'm going to jazz up the ends of them a little bit when you're looking at the toggle bar. So we're going to concentrate on the loop first, and then we're going to go into working on the bar. So first we're going loop, then we'll go with that bar. In addition to the 11 Delicas and the 15-0s, you're also going to need a thread and needle. My thread of choice is going to be Wildfire beading thread. I'm also using a size 10 English beading needle, and I did choose to use the green color of the fire line because I'm working with a blue. I could have used black too. It was kind of a toss-up. When you're working with blues and purples, it's a toss-up usually what color thread you want to work with. But these are the thread, needle, seed beads, and then I also have some 3-4mm crystals that I'm going to use at the ends of my toggle to show you. So again, to start out, we're going to be using we're going to be working on our loop, and we're going to be starting out with a peyote stitch. So the first step in making this loop of the toggle is to add 40 of your 15-0s to your thread. I have about 48 inches of thread here. I'm going to have a little bit more than I need, but I like to have more than enough. And I'm actually going to take those 40 beads and I double count them because we are doing even count peyote, so I want to make sure that I have 40. If you know that you want to make a bigger toggle or a smaller toggle, then you would change the count based on that, but you still want to stay in even numbers. I'm taking these 40 beads and I'm going to take my needle in a circular fashion, and I'm going to kind of put my thread and needle in a loop here. I'm going to sew back through 4 of my initial 15-0 beads. So I'm sewing back through 4 of them. And I'm going to pull, and that's going to get me my loop. So I'm not at the end of my thread, I'm actually in the middle of my thread. So I have half the thread on one side of my loop and half the thread on the other side. That's because we're going to be moving our needle from one side of the thread to the other side. So I'm going to proceed with peyote, and I'm going to be doing circular peyote. And to do that, we're going to be doing 3 rows using the 15-0s. So I have 1 done. I'm going to do 2 more rows. So I have my 15-0 on. I'm going to skip the next bead, which would be 5, and go through bead 6. And sew back. Skip bead 7, sew through 8. Always adding a bead in between. And as you notice, this is kind of pulling apart a little bit. You're just going to give a nice yank to the other side. If you want, you can put a stop bead on the other side that'll come off. Put on another bead, and I'm going to sew through 10. Another bead, 12, 14, 16. So you're just sewing through those even count numbers. And I'm going to continue doing this the whole way around my loop until I get to the start of the other side. So until I get to the start of the loop, I'm going to keep going around and around and around, sewing through the even count beads. And it's going to start to form that little peyote row. So I've made it the whole way around my loop here doing my peyote, and I'm getting ready to add my last bead. I'm going to go through that last bead that I need to go through, and then I'm also going to get to the top of the row. I'm going through the first bead that I put on in row 2. Now this is a little confusing when you're talking about peyote, but we actually, even though we've only gone and stitched around twice, we actually have completed 3 rows of our peyote. The initial peyote where I put on 40 beads is actually 2 rows at once that you're creating. So what you're always going to do is count in a block section here, 1, 2, 3, that's 3 rows. And it's 3 different planes that those are on. So we're actually, even though we've done 2 loops around, we're going to be done our 3 rows of our peyote stitch here. When we're done with the peyote, the first row we added 40. Each row after this, we're going to add 20. So we added 20 in row 3, and then we're going to add 20 in row 4. But row 4 is actually going to be with the Delica beads. So row 4, I'm going to pick up the Delicas, and I'm going to sew through the 15-0 that's popping out at the top here. Pick up a Delica, sew through the 15-0. And I'm going to continue doing the same thing that whole way around. So I'm doing that sewing of the Delicas on the whole way around my loop. Picking up the 15-0 that's sticking towards the outside and sewing the whole way around. So I'm going to continue this whole way around, sewing on this row, which would actually be row 4 and row 1 of Delicas. I'm going to continue the whole way around this loop here. So again, I've gone the whole way around with my first row of Delicas, which is my 4th row of peyote. I'm going to go through the last 15-0 bead that I need to go through, as well as the first Delica that I put on in that 4th row. Once I come out the top there, I'm going to do 2 more rows of Delicas. So I have the 3 rows of the 15-0s, and I'm going to continue doing 3 rows of Delicas in the same fashion, picking up a bead, going through the Delica. And I'm going to do this 1 more time around, and then another time around as well. So I'm done here with my 3rd row of my Delicas on this side, and you can see that there's a little bit of a cupping effect that's going on here. We're going to use that to our advantage. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start some peyote on the other thread. So I'm going to take my needle off this side, and I'm going to stick it onto the other end of my thread. Remember that first row of 15-0s, what we did was we put it in the center of our thread. If by any chance you get to this point and you say, oh no, I didn't do that, you can always add more thread on. But this will make it easier for you to continue on your way. So I'm going to then ignore the thread that's hanging out there of my rows that I've just done, and I'm picking up the other thread. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start peyote on the other side. Naturally, when you start with your 15-0s here, it starts with that peyote as you create it, and I'm going to do my peyote on the other side of it with my 11-0 Delicas. So I'm going to start off, when I start off here, I'm coming my thread and needle out of a bead. I'm going to add my Delica on, and I'm going to sew through the next bead in line of the 15-0s. And I'm going to continue doing this the whole way along. And it's a little bit of a tight fit in here when you get going. If you think it's really difficult, if you have a lined color of 15-0s, like a silver lined or one of the pearlized ones, they tend to have a little bit smaller of a hole, and you might need to switch to a size 12 English beading needle rather than a 10. But I'm going to continue doing my peyote the whole way now on this side of the thread, doing my 11-0s, not my 15-0s. I'm going to take that one off. Put my Delicas on. I'm going the whole way around, putting on 20 of the Delica beads, the whole way around this center row. And I'm going to continue going the whole way around, and then I'll show you how we start to add the 2nd row of Delica beads. So you can see here, I'm done my first row of my Delicas on the inside, and what's starting to happen is I'm starting to get a little bit of a cupping effect, and what's going to occur as I do the last row is it's going to cup even more. These Delicas are sitting almost on top of the 15-0s, even though I was sewing them next to them. So as I do my next row of my Delica beads, I'm going to have a little bit more space to work with, and I'm going to sew my next Delicas in place. And then I'm going to connect these two sides together and roll them over to get my loop. So I'm going to continue doing another row of peyote with my 11-0 Delicas to make 2 complete rows of Delicas on this side of the 15-0s. So I finished sewing up my second row of peyote with my Delicas on that row there. And what I'm going to do now, and you can see it's almost like a tire that's starting to form. The 15-0s are laying in the middle of my tube here, and the 11-0s are sticking to the outside and forming almost like a little tire or a little groove that's inside there. Because I did 3 rows on one side and 2 on the other with my Delicas, it allows me to seam up this row because it's odd count, and this is going to fit right in directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be zigzagging back from one side to the other side and just seaming right up the sides. So I'm seaming from one side to the other, just in that zigzag peyote fashion. I won't pull tight here so you can see the thread a little bit. So you can see, if you can trace my thread here, the thread's going zigzag through. Once I get them a nice tight pull, it's going to pull them even tighter, so that way you can't really see the thread at all. And that's really the effect that you want, is that you don't want to see that the thread is additional here at all. So what you can see here is I'm sewing right along the sides and just picking up again. I'm just picking up those opposite rows and sewing, and then it's going to form a nice ridge for me. So I'm just sewing from one side to the other side and back again. And just getting that nice zigzag and pulling nice and tight. You can see my little trick there. I kind of sew through 2 at once and grab 2 and sew through and give a good yank. And I'm going to continue doing this the whole way on the outside here of my toggle ring. So I've come the whole way around sewing up my toggle here, and you can see it's nice and rounded now, and I have that nice rounded effect. I'm going to finish off and just show you how I finish off. So I have one more place to sew here, and then what I'm going to do is sew back through that first bead that I was coming out of when I started my loop. Give a nice tight little yank, and that completes my circle. As you wear it, as you have it here, this will even start to lay a little bit more flat for you, and you can kind of work around it. What I am going to do is I'm going to create a little loop to hold my toggle in place into whatever I'm doing. If you're not sure what you're going to use this on, you can also just leave a lot of thread attached and attach it right to a seed bead project. So if I had a bracelet that I wanted to attach it to, I could attach it right to it. I don't need to make that loop. But I'll show you how to make that loop right now. What I'm actually going to do is bring my thread and needle so that it's coming out on one of my side beads. So remember, I did 5 rows of my peyote, so I'm going to have a little point section here. That point section is also, if you want to embellish, that's where we did the embellishments here on the side of this one, is picking up that one that's sticking out right at the end. And I'm just going to make the loop. I'm going to make my loop a little bit fancier. I'm going to stick a Swarovski crystal right after my thread. Let that drop down. And then I'm going to do a little loop. I'm going to do my loop out of 15-0s. The Delicas have more of a cut shape, and they're more tubular. So the 15-0s, when I'm using them, are going to give a little bit more of a rounded effect for my little ring here. I'm going back down that Swarovski, and then I'm going to grab onto the next seed bead in that line, and that's going to get my little loop. If I want to, I could embellish this even more and do peyote on the loop or reinforce it and go back through. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be done my loop here and be finished with my toggle. And to get rid of my threads, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mimic the line that I just sewed the whole way back till I'm getting to the other side. When I get to the other side here where this thread is, I'm going to tie them off, do a little bit of glue, and have that be completed. If you want to, you can end your thread in the middle, pulling both threads kind of to the back. Because I have the green color next to the blue, I won't see it that much. So I'm going to sew the whole way over, and we're just going to tie a little knot, and that's how we're going to finish our toggle loop. So now that we're done with loop, we're going to work on our bar. So for the bar, I've used the remainder of my thread, the longer piece that I cut off after I tied off my knot here on the side. And I've put a stop bead on that. I've used an 8/0 seed bead and just left a little bit of a tail in order to tie onto, so it's not very long at all. I'm starting off with 18 of my Delica beads, and then I'm going to continue doing peyote. So the bar, congrats, you're done your loop, and that's the hard part. Now we get to do the bar, which is just simple, easy peyote. And we're going to do 10 rows of the simple peyote. So originally we have 18 beads on, and we're going to add 9 beads in each row after this. So I'm going to go back into bead number 17 after adding another bead and go straight along the rows of peyote. Again, I have videos that just do simple peyote, which is what this toggle bar is. You can pick that up and look at it if you need to, and pause this video. And again, I'm just going to be picking up my beads, skipping a bead, and going through the next one in line. I'm going to continue going along my peyote rows. And again, I'm going to do this 10 rows long. What will happen is I'll have 5 beads on each side. And then we're going to seam it up to make it rounded like this one. So continue doing 10 rows of peyote. Again, your first row was 2, so we're actually on row 3. So I'm just showing my progress here a little bit. I'm on row 6 and I'm still beading away. So you're just going to continue doing your straight peyote piece. Again, doing 10 rows. I'm on row 6, so I have 4 more to go after this. So now I'm done with my 10 rows of my peyote, and what I'm going to do to get my bar shape is roll over, just like we did with the toggle loop, seaming it up. We're going to seam up the bar as well. So I have my 10 rows. I'm going to seam up the bar just in the same fashion that we did the loop. So I'm going to start on one side here, go through the end bead, going to the other side and snaking back and forth, and sewing right back and forth and creating that tube, going from right to left and right to left again. Again, once I get a couple rows here, I'll pull nice and tight. So right now you see some of that thread in between there. I'm going to give a nice yank, and you're going to see that thread disappear. And I'm going to continue sewing up the whole bar length. And this whole bar length is going to then create my whole bar. Once I have this sewn up, all of these 18 beads here, going back and forth, what I want to do then is I'm going to add some decoration here at the end just to form the end of my bar. Once I get to the end here and I sew through my last bead, I'm going to take off my stop bead on the original side. It's not going to let me, so oh, there we go. And I'm going to tie a little knot here to get rid of that end cord. So this has my little tube. This is a good idea too. You can make beads this way. Make them a little bit wider, and then when you roll them over. So there I have my knot. And I'm just going to let that hang out for now. Eventually I'll glue that in place. Or you can feed the knot back through. It's kind of up to you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to decorate the ends of my toggle. With this one here, we have just little teardrops that are sticking out. This one here that I did with regular 11/0s versus Delicas, I do have crystals in them. Since I used the crystal here on the loop, I'm also going to use the crystals on the side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread and needle. I'm going to go through my bar, loop, give a nice little yank. That's going to pull that knot to a little bit more towards center. Once I'm coming out the other side of my bar, I'm going to grab on to one of my crystals and let it drop down next to the bar. So it's going to stick out there on the side. What I'm going to do, just like I did with this one here up in the corner, is I'm going to do a little picot trim using some of my 15/0 beads. And I'm going to pick up 3 15/0 beads. I don't need a little crystal there. I'm going to pick up 3 of my 15/0s to make a little picot trim. Go back through my crystal and back through the bar, coming out on the other side. Give a nice little yank. And that's going to decorate the side of my bar. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, adding a crystal, and I'm going to have to grab a couple more of my 15s out here, put most of them away. Got 3 more of my 15-0s out, and I'm ready to put this on as well to the picot trim of this one. I'm going to go back through the bar, and if I want to, I can reinforce what I've done on the other side. Or what I can do is just go back down through that crystal a little bit, try to tilt my bar a little bit that I can come out somewhere in the middle. If you have trouble doing that, you can usually come out right after the crystal. Mine doesn't want to bend at all. I did mine nice and tight. So I'm going to come out after my crystal because it went in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a bead on the side and sew down the line, just like I did with the toggle to add the little loop. I'm going to do with the bar as well. So I'm sewing up the sides till I get to a center point where I can do a loop. And like I said, I sewed really tightly here, so I'm kind of having to wiggle my needle, if you see, to get it back through the loops. Again, if you know that you're going to attach this to something, you can just wait to do the loop till after. But I'm just going back through these so that way it's going to get to the middle here. Sometimes also if you have a size 10 needle on, I said during the loop you may want to switch to a 12. Probably be easier for me right now, honestly, if I switch to a 12 needle. But I don't feel like rethreading a needle. And I'm wiggling back through, and I'm almost to my middle to do my loop. So I've wiggled through here all my beads, and then I'm going to pick up some more of my 15-0s, do a little loop here just like I did the first one, tie it off, and I'm going to be completely done my toggle. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you guys get a chance to make some of these toggles. You can also use them in other variations to make earrings, dropping some beads in. You could loop them together and make a link chain. So there's a lot of options to do learning these techniques, not just making toggles. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. You go home, you make some toggles. You can see here one thing I didn't mention early on was the difference between the look of the Delicas in these two versus the look of the Seedbeads. Delicas are going to give you a much tighter, cleaner look since they have a better fit for the peyote. Check us out on Facebook. Hopefully you like us and also view a bunch of our other YouTube videos. If you have a chance, strongly suggest that you get to visit one of our lovely stores. When you're in one of the areas of the stores, stop by, say hi to us, and learn something new. So thanks a lot for watching.